When Daniel walked out of that office, leaving me staring at the empty walls of what was supposed to be our dream, I felt as if the ground had been ripped out from beneath me. I wasn't just poor again. I was worse than poor. Poverty had once been a cruel companion I had learned to live with, but betrayal was a knife that cut deeper than hunger, deeper than exhaustion. It wasn't only my money he had stolen. It was my trust, my years, my faith in friendship. For days I couldn't breathe properly. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with a start, sweating, hoping it was just a nightmare. But every morning, reality greeted me with the same bitter truth. Daniel had taken everything, and I had nothing left. I remember one evening in particular. I walked past one of the properties we had developed together. The building stood tall, shining under the streetlights, its glass windows reflecting the golden dusk. The tenants inside lived their ordinary lives, unaware of the man standing outside, me, who had once laid the first stone of that place, and inside that same building. Daniel sat in the lavish office that should have been ours. His nameplate glistened on the desk, his picture framed on the wall. I stood outside for hours, watching people go in and out, businessmen shaking his hand, journalists taking his quotes. And me? I was invisible. To the world he was the visionary. I was forgotten. The worst part was returning home. My landlord, a man who once praised me for paying rent early, now treated me like a beggar. "One more week, Isaac," he warned one night. "If you can't pay, you're out." I sat in my room that night with a single candle burning because I could no longer afford electricity. I stared at the flame and thought, how did it come to this? Daniel had not only stolen my wealth, he had stolen my reputation. He spread lies, whispering to clients and investors that I was reckless, incompetent, untrustworthy. People believed him. After all, he had the money, the influence, the smooth smile that convinced even the toughest skeptics. I went from being invited to dinners and business meetings to being ignored. Calls went unanswered. Old friends stopped returning messages. In a city where success shines like a crown, failure makes you untouchable. One evening I visited my mother's grave. She had passed years ago, but she was the only one I could speak to without fear of judgment. I knelt there, fingers trembling, tears wetting the soil. "Ma," I whispered, "they've taken everything from me. I don't know how to fight anymore. I don't know if I have the strength." But even as I said it, deep down I knew I couldn't quit. My mother hadn't raised me to bow down to betrayal. Her voice seemed to echo in my memory. "Isaac, no matter how dark the night, the sun always rises again." Those words lit a spark. Small but enough, I picked up odd jobs. Anything that paid, loading crates at a warehouse, sweeping floors at a mechanic's shop, delivering parcels through the freezing nights. I, who had once walked through boardrooms in a suit, now wore grease-stained clothes and carried heavy sacks on my back. People sneered. Some even laughed. "Look at Isaac," they said. "The fallen king." I stayed silent. I swallowed my pride. I worked double shifts, then triple. My hands blistered, my back ached, but every drop of sweat reminded me of the fire burning inside. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my life, my identity, and every night as I collapsed on a worn mattress in a shared room, one thought fueled me. Daniel will not win. Not forever. The city may have believed his lies, but I knew the truth. I knew how he had deceived me, forged documents, manipulated people. I kept quiet. I watched. I learned. Patience became my weapon. I waited for the right time, because one day Daniel would fall. And when he did, I would be there, not as the poor man outside his window, but as the storm that shattered his empire. That was the promise I made to myself. And to my mother's memory. Years passed, and I lived in shadows, working, saving, observing. Every humiliation I endured became fuel for my determination. Every insult I swallowed became a stone in the foundation of my revenge. I took jobs nobody else wanted. Night shifts in warehouses, delivery runs in the pouring rain, construction sites where the dust choked your lungs. My hands became rough, my body lean, my will unbreakable. I was no longer the man who had once lived in comfort. I was forged in hardship, stronger than ever before. But I wasn't just working for survival. I was planning. Quietly, carefully, I studied business again. Not in universities or offices, but through experience, through watching, through listening. I made contacts among laborers, small traders. and honest people who had also been burned by men like Daniel. And then, slowly, opportunities began to appear. With the money I had saved, I started a modest logistics company. Nothing grand, just a few trucks, a handful of drivers, and the promise that I would never cheat them the way Daniel had cheated me. Word spread quickly. Isaac was a man of his word. Where Daniel had used lies, I used integrity. Where he built on betrayal, I built on trust. It wasn't easy. Competitors mocked me. Banks refused me loans. But every contract I fulfilled, every delivery I made on time, every worker I paid fairly, it added to my reputation. And soon the same people who had once turned their backs on me began to return. Not all, but enough. Investors saw that I wasn't just another failure. I was a survivor. In 5 years, my company grew. From trucks to warehouses, from local deliveries to international shipments. I built an empire, not overnight, not through deception, but through relentless effort and the loyalty of those who believed in me. Meanwhile, Daniel's world was not as perfect as it seemed. Greed has a way of eating its own. He expanded too fast, cutting corners, bribing officials, forging documents. For a time it worked. His wealth grew, his name appeared in magazines. But behind the scenes, cracks began to form. Investors whispered of unpaid debts. Authorities began sniffing around shady deals, and I watched, patiently. The day came when one of his closest partners approached me. Betrayed, unpaid, and furious, he wanted revenge. He handed me evidence, documents proving Daniel's fraud, papers that could expose his empire for what it truly was, a house of cards. I didn't rush. I studied every line, every signature. I built my case layer by layer, and then, when the moment was right, I struck. The media got the files. The authorities received the evidence. Former allies turned against him, desperate to save themselves. Overnight, Daniel's name, once celebrated, became a curse. I remember the headline, "Business Tycoon Exposed in Multi-Million Fraud Scandal." Daniel was arrested. His property seized. His investors abandoned him. The empire he had stolen from me crumbled into dust, and I stood on the steps of the courthouse, not as a broken man, but as proof that betrayal can never truly destroy the righteous. I saw him once more. Years after his fall, I found him sitting at a train station bench, clothes torn, eyes hollow, begging for coins from strangers who passed without notice. For a long moment, I just stood there, watching the man who had once stood above me, now beneath even pity. He looked up and recognition flickered in his eyes. Shame, regret, and fear mixed in his gaze. "Isaac," he whispered, voice trembling. "Help me, please." I didn't shout. I didn't strike him. I simply leaned forward and said, "Once I was at your door and you left me outside. Tonight you sit in the cold. This is not my revenge, Daniel. This is life showing you the weight of your sins." I walked away, because revenge was never about destroying him. It was about reclaiming myself. Today, I live not as a victim, not as a beggar, but as a man who rose from betrayal to build something stronger than money or property: respect, dignity, and truth. And that is the lesson I carry with me, and the one I share with anyone listening. People can steal your wealth, your comfort, even your reputation, but they can never steal your determination. If you keep your will alive one day, the same hands that pushed you down will tremble when they see you rise.